There can be, I think, sort of a sense of entitlement that comes along with having faith. That's true, at least, I'm pretty sure, for those of us who belong to the traditions that flowed out of the experience of Abraham, for Jews, Christians, for Muslims. Whether directly expressed or not, I think we have a feeling of being called and chosen, a feeling of being special in some way, blessed in some way, maybe privileged in some way. We have a special relationship with God. God must be on our side, we think. God must listen to our prayers. And the Jewish expectation of the Messiah, it's important to note, arose within that context, at least in part, of that sense of entitlement. When David was king, things were as they should be. And when things fell apart, when the nation split in two or was conquered by greater powers, it meant quite clearly for those who believed that something had gone wrong. But still, the faithful knew that God would make it right, even in exile in Babylon, even as a minor client of the vast Persian Empire, even after being conquered yet again by Alexander the Great, even after one of the descendants of Alexander set up his own image in the temple in Jerusalem, even after Rome snuffed out another brief period of conditional independence. The faithful still believed that God would make it right. There would be a new king. A Messiah would come through earthly rebellion or heavenly warfare. Some way, somehow, the scales would be righted. They were entitled to that. That's how things should be. And that sense of entitlement, that certainty that they were right and history was wrong, had gone on for over 900 years by the time that Jesus rode into Jerusalem. So there was a lot more riding on that donkey that day than just Jesus. And that's why, at least in part, there was such an agonizing sense of disappointment, of dashed hopes, even betrayal that was felt when Jesus was arrested and tried and crucified and buried. Wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong again. That was certainly how his closest disciples felt, but I'm also pretty sure that it was true for many others besides them. And some of those reacted with tears, some of those reacted maybe with a kind of resignation that, well, maybe next time. Some reacted with anger. If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. And along with the sadness or depression or anger, there was a layer of resentment, a sense of being victimized. And the sense of being victimized, I think, comes inevitably when a sense of entitlement is rejected or neglected. A feeling like being a victim who is oppressed by an unfair world, or feeling a victim as a kind of fallback position when life turns out to be going wrong. And you can feel like a victim of some worldly authority or the systems that those authorities set up. You can feel like a victim of some evil power. You can feel like a victim of an unjust God who won't keep his promises when you keep yours. And as David Brooks pointed out in the editorial this week that started me thinking along these lines, a sense of being victimized can serve us pretty well in a number of ways. A sense of being victimized can help us maintain a sense of our specialness, of privilege, of entitlement in the face of decades and decades of life, or centuries and centuries of historical contradictory evidence. And it can do that even while freeing us from any serious sense of personal responsibility, any serious feeling of guilt that might come when life goes wrong. It's not my fault. I'm just a victim here. The sense of being victimized can also feed in us a passion for revenge, which really is energizing in many ways, and in turn can help us justify what otherwise would be quite condemnable behavior. Now, this all isn't limited, certainly, to Jewish culture by any means. It's essentially what's behind ISIS, I think, and other religiously based terrorism, including the Shia reaction to ISIS's reaction to us, basically. And our reaction, now at least, to the Shia reaction against the Sunni reaction against us. So it goes on and on and on. It's found in what's called Han in Korean culture. There's a whole Korean word dedicated to this complex feeling. And oddly enough, this sense of victimization gets used by people and groups that have never really been very victimized, and may even be bullies who have victimized others, but feel that victimization in a really strange sort of shadow introjection of the oppression that they project. Both a sense of entitlement and a sense of being victimized, however, are byproducts of the same self-delusional lie. They are based on an infantile narcissism that thinks the world revolves around oneself, that thinks reality revolves around one's own wishes. That is entirely appropriate for an infant, but when you find it in an adult, becomes either ridiculous or dangerous, depending upon their position. And infantile narcissism thinks that one's own desires and preferences are the standard by which one judges life. That one's own opinions of right and wrong are universal laws. So when things don't go the way that I want them to go, then something must be wrong. Well, nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. We don't write the script for life. We are not in charge of designing our own or anybody else's reality. And that may seem to burst our bubble, but in the end, it's really what sets us free. Because it's a narcissistic error to think that our lives should be painless and always comfortable, with no tragedy or disappointment, with no failure or betrayal. And for Christians at least, it's a narcissistic heresy to think that if we do suffer pain or discomfort, experience tragedy or disappointment, if we feel like a failure or we end up being betrayed, that somehow we're being punished because we've done something wrong. It's not all about us. The world's not all about us. Our own lives even are not all, at least, about us. The desire of the people gathered along the way of the palms in expectation of a conquering Messiah to come to town and throw out the Romans and reestablish the reign of David was shallow and short-sighted, succumbing to the addiction of illusory worldly power, and the feeling of loss at the foot of the cross, the fear that caused Peter to deny him 3 times, the anger of the people who didn't get their king was shallow and short-sighted as well, in its limited belief that death in any way disrupted what Jesus had come to accomplish. The cross, in fact, was the means of its accomplishment. It was essential. It was crucial, you might say. Without death on the cross, there'd be no Lord of life. Pilate said, make it as secure as you can. Well, you can't. You can't make it secure. Without all the painful or shameful, unfair or frightening, or just irritating and disappointing things that have happened to you and to those that you care for, without all that, you would not be you. You'd be somebody else. And you're the one that God loves with that particular confusing and unasked for combination. And it's you that Jesus died to show the truth of that love and the depth of that love.